Chestburster scene. In 1979, Ridley Scott's Alien introduced one of cinema's most viscerally painful death scenes. John Hurt's character Kane appears to recover from his encounter with the facehugger alien, joining the crew for a final meal before returning to stasis. Mid-conversation, Kane begins convulsing violently at the dinner table. The crew tries to restrain him as something moves beneath his shirt. Then, in a spray of blood, the creature erupts from his chest cavity, tearing through skin, muscle, and bone before slithering away. The scene was shot with minimal rehearsal, meaning the cast's reactions of genuine shock and horror are authentic. Veronica Cartwright was positioned to catch the full force of the blood spray, and her scream wasn't acting. The practical effects, designed by H.R. Geiger and executed by a team hiding beneath the table, used real animal organs and high-pressure blood tubes. This wasn't just a death, it was a birth, making Kane both victim and unwilling host in what became one of horror cinema's most imitated moments. Bone Tomahawk death. In 2015, S. Craig Zahler's Western horror film Bone Tomahawk delivered a death so brutal that it caused walkouts at multiple festival screenings. A character is stripped naked, inverted, and held in place by cave-dwelling cannibals. One of the creatures produces a tomahawk and, starting at the groin, bisects the victim completely down the middle of his body in a single extended take. The practical effects show every stage of the process, and the victim remains conscious and screaming until the tomahawk reaches his sternum. Kurt Russell's character and the other witnesses are forced to watch, powerless to intervene. Critics noted that the scene's impact came not from quick cuts or suggestion, but from the unflinching camera and the methodical pace. Festival audiences reported the theater filling with groans and the sound of people leaving their seats. Zahler defended the scene as necessary to establish the threat level of the antagonists, but even hardened horror fans consider it among the most difficult deaths to watch in modern cinema. Passion's crucifixion. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, released in 2004, depicts the final 12 hours of Jesus Christ's life with historically detailed brutality. The scourging scene alone lasts nearly 10 minutes of screen time. Roman soldiers used two different types of whips. First a standard flagrum, then a flagrum taxillatum embedded with metal balls and sheepbone fragments designed to tear flesh. Actor Jim Caviezel endured extensive makeup sessions to depict skin hanging in strips from Christ's back. The subsequent carrying of the cross shows the rough wood grinding into these open wounds with every step. The crucifixion itself follows Roman methods exactly. Nails are driven through the wrists, not the palms. As historical records indicate, the film shows the victim struggling to push up on the nail through their feet to draw breath, as crucifixion kills through asphyxiation rather than blood loss. Medical consultants confirmed the accuracy of the physiological details. The film grossed over $600 million worldwide, but generated intense controversy over whether the extreme violence served spiritual purposes or constituted gratuitous torture imagery. Saw Reverse Bear Trap. The original Saw, released in 2004, introduced audiences to Jigsaw's philosophy through elaborate death traps. The reverse bear trap stands out for its elegant horror. Amanda Young wakes with a metal device locked around her head and a timer counting down. The device is designed to pry her jaws apart and tear her head open from the inside if she fails to retrieve a key from the stomach of her supposedly dead cellmate, who is actually alive but heavily sedated. The mechanics are clearly explained. Two metal arms will spring outward with enough force to rip through bone. Amanda has 60 seconds. She must cut into another person while they're still breathing, dig through their stomach contents, and unlock the device before the timer expires. The scene established the franchise's signature style, traps that force victims to harm themselves or others to survive. With every second of their panic captured on camera, Amanda survives, but the image of the trap's mechanics became iconic enough to appear in multiple sequels and launch an entire subgenre of torture device horror. Saving Private Ryan Steven Spielberg's 1998 war epic includes a death that audiences found more disturbing than the explosive carnage of the Omaha Beach sequence. During the final battle, Private Mellish engages in hand-to-hand combat with a German soldier in a bombed-out building. The fight is desperate and exhausting. Eventually, the German soldier gains the upper hand and slowly, intimately, pushes a knife into Mellish's chest. The scene lasts over a minute. The German soldier speaks soothingly in German, making shushing sounds, while Mellish's eyes show his realization that he's going to die. Meanwhile, Corporal Upham sits paralyzed with fear on the stairs, unable to intervene despite having a loaded weapon. The death works because there's There's no musical score, no heroic final words, just the sounds of struggle and Mellish's weakening protests. Adam Goldberg's performance captures the transition from determination to terror to resignation. Veterans who saw the film noted that this death, more than any other in the movie, captured the intimate horror of close combat. The psychological impact on Upham, who must live with his failure to act, adds another layer of pain to an already unbearable scene. RoboCop's Murphy Paul Verhoeven's 1987 action satire opens with a death sequence that establishes the stakes through sheer overwhelming violence. Officer Alex Murphy, played by Peter Weller, is cornered in an abandoned factory by Clarence Boddicker's gang. What follows is an execution designed to be as drawn out and cruel as possible. The gang members take turns shooting Murphy methodically, destroying his hand with a shotgun blast, then his arm, then various parts of his body. Boddicker counts the shots and directs the sequence like a conductor. The scene includes over 30 distinct bullet impacts shown on camera. Murphy remains conscious through most of it, trying to crawl away, until Boddicker finally shoots him in the head. The extended nature of the death, combined with the gang's casual enjoyment of Murphy's suffering, made this scene controversial enough that it had to be edited to avoid an X rating. Verhoeven intended the sequence to function as a crucifixion allegory, with Murphy's resurrection as RoboCop representing a dark technological rebirth. The practical effects used over 300 squibs and required multiple takes to capture the full horror of Murphy's destruction. Green Inferno Death, Eli Roth's 2013 cannibal horror film. The Green Inferno pays homage to Italian cannibal exploitation films of the 1970s and 80s. The film's most notorious death occurs when the indigenous tribe selects one of the captured activists for their feast. The victim is dragged to the center of the village, restrained, and subjected to systematic dismemberment while fully conscious. The tribe removes his limbs one at a time, cauterizing the wounds to prevent him from bleeding out too quickly. Throughout the process, the victim can see what's happening to his own body. His screams attract the attention of the other captives locked in bamboo cages, forced to watch and realize their probable fate. Roth used practical effects for the majority of the sequence, with prosthetic limbs designed to tear realistically. The scene sparked debate about whether modern horror had moved beyond the need for such explicit violence. Roth defended the film as social commentary about ineffective activism, but critics argued that the suffering depicted far exceeded any satirical purpose. Several distribution companies initially refused to release the film, and multiple countries banned it outright. By the way, if this kind of content interests you, I create videos exploring film history regularly. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Final Destination 5. The Final Destination franchise built its reputation on elaborate death sequences, but the gymnastics death in the 2011 fifth installment stands out for its escalating horror. A young gymnast is practicing her routine while cosmic forces orchestrate a chain of environmental failures. A fan malfunctions, blowing powder into the air. A screw loosens on the equipment. Each element is shown in extreme close-up as the machinery of fate aligns. When she finally dismounts, she lands awkwardly on the balance beam, breaking her back. The camera lingers as she tries to comprehend her paralysis. Then, as other gymnasts rush to help, another equipment failure causes her to fall forward onto the parallel bars. She lands with the bars entering her body through her abdomen and exiting through her back, impaling her completely. The scene takes over 4 minutes from first hint of danger to final impact. The franchise's signature move is showing audiences exactly how each death will occur, then drawing out the anticipation until the inevitable conclusion. This particular death combines the horror of athletic injury with medieval impalement, and the victim's consciousness throughout amplifies the audience's discomfort. Wolf Creek Paralysis. Greg McLean's 2005 Australian horror film introduced Mick Taylor, a serial killer who combines outback hospitality with surgical cruelty. In the film's most disturbing sequence, one of the backpackers wakes to find herself tied up in Mick's camp. Taylor explains that he's going to play a game. Using a hunting knife, he severs her spinal column at a specific vertebra, paralyzing her from the waist down while keeping her fully conscious and aware. He then asks if she can feel various things he does to her lower body. She cannot. The scene's horror comes from Taylor's casual demeanor and his technical knowledge of human anatomy. Actor John Jarratt based his performance on real Australian criminals, giving Taylor an authenticity that made audiences deeply uncomfortable. The victim remains alive and aware of her condition, but completely unable to escape or defend herself. McLean stated in interviews that he researched actual criminal cases to ensure the scenario was physiologically possible. The Australian Classification Board initially refused to rate the film, concerned that the torture sequences were too realistic and could serve as instructional material. Reservoir Dogs, Torture. Quentin Tarantino's 1992 debut feature includes a torture sequence that built his reputation for stylized violence. Mr. Blonde, played by Michael Madsen, has captured a police officer and tied him to a chair in a warehouse. While Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Wheel plays on the radio, Blonde dances around the officer, taunting him with a straight razor. The scene is famous for what Tarantino doesn't show. The camera pans away at the crucial moment when Blonde cuts off the officer's ear, but audiences hear every sound. When the camera returns, the ear is gone. Blood streams down the officer's face, and Blonde is talking into the severed ear before tossing it aside. He then produces a gasoline can, dousing the officer and preparing to burn him alive before being interrupted. The scene's power comes from Madsen's performance, which makes the violence seem casual and almost boring to Blonde. The disconnect between the cheerful music, Blonde's relaxed demeanor, and the horrific acts he commits creates a cognitive dissonance that many viewers found more disturbing than explicit gore. The scene established Tarantino's signature style of combining pop culture with extreme violence, though critics debated whether the torture served the story or simply showcased the director's aesthetic interests. Martyrs, flaying scene. Pascal Logier's 2008 French horror film, Martyrs, pushes extreme cinema into philosophical territory. The film's final act reveals that a secret society has been torturing young women in an attempt to create a martyr who can glimpse the afterlife and report back. The protagonist, Anna, endures months of torture before the society determines she's ready for their final experiment. They perform a complete flaying, removing all the skin from her body while she remains alive. Medical equipment monitors her vital signs throughout the procedure. The society believes this ultimate trauma will push her consciousness beyond death's threshold, while her body technically remains alive. The film shows the procedure in clinical detail, with Anna strapped to an apparatus and sedated but conscious. Her flayed body is then displayed to the society's members, who wait for her to communicate what she's seen. The scene sparked intense controversy at film festivals, with some critics calling it transcendent art and others condemning it as nihilistic torture imagery. Laugier defended the sequence as necessary to the film's exploration of suffering and transcendence, but several countries banned the film or heavily censored this sequence. The practical effects required extensive prosthetics and were so realistic that the effects team provided proof to censors that no actual harm occurred during filming. The Fly transformation. David Cronenberg's 1986 remake of The Fly transforms a science fiction premise into body horror tragedy. Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum, accidentally merges his DNA with a housefly during a teleportation experiment. His transformation takes place over weeks, with each stage more horrifying than the last. His fingernails fall off, revealing insect appendages underneath. His ears detach, his teeth fall out, replaced by mandibles growing from his gums. In one scene, Brundle demonstrates his new diet by vomiting digestive enzymes onto a donut, dissolving it into liquid before consuming it. The makeup effects, created by Chris Wallace, won an Academy Award for their meticulous detail. Each prosthetic piece was designed to show the biological logic of Brundle's transformation. What makes his death particularly painful is his consciousness throughout. Brundle knows exactly what's happening to him, and can articulate his horror at feeling his humanity slip away. The final transformation into the Brundlefly leaves him as a barely recognizable insect-human hybrid trapped in his own deteriorating body. His eventual death, when he begs his girlfriend to end his suffering, comes as a mercy. Cronenberg stated that the film was partly inspired by the physical deterioration he witnessed during the AIDS crisis, adding an additional layer of tragedy to Brundle's transformation. Midsommar's Ättestupa. Ari Aster's 2019 folk horror film Midsommar introduces its violence through a ritualized suicide ceremony. The Swedish cult practices Ättestupa, a tradition where community elders jump from a cliff upon reaching their 72nd year. Two elders, a man and a woman, are dressed in ceremonial garments and led to a cliff overlooking rocks. They jump willingly. The woman dies instantly on impact, her skull crushed. The man survives. His legs are shattered, his body broken, and he begins screaming in agony. The cult members expected this possibility. Several villagers calmly approach the dying man with large mallets and proceed to crush his skull as an act of mercy, each villager taking several swings to finish the job. The visiting outsiders watch in horror, while the cult members remain serene, as this is simply their way. Astor shot the scene in broad daylight, with the camera lingering on every detail. The practical effects show the realistic results of falling from that height and the subsequent mercy killing. What makes the scene particularly disturbing is the cultural disconnect. For the cult, this is a beautiful ceremony worthy of celebration. For the audience and the visiting characters, it's a nightmare. The scene establishes that the seemingly peaceful commune harbors a completely alien moral framework, one where suffering is ritualized and death is performed with ceremonial precision. Casino Head, Martin Scorsese's 1995 crime epic Casino, concludes with the death of Joe Pesci's character Nicky Santoro. Based on the real murder of mobster Anthony Spilotro, the scene shows Nicky and his brother being lured to a cornfield under false pretenses. A group of mobsters ambushes them, beating both brothers with baseball bats and metal pipes. Nicky's head is placed in a metal vise, which is slowly tightened while he's still conscious. The vise crushes his skull gradually, showing Pesci's face contorting in agony. Both brothers are beaten until they're unrecognizable, then buried alive in a shallow grave while still breathing. Scorsese filmed the scene with minimal music, letting the sounds of the beating and the brothers' screams carry the horror. The real Anthony Spilotro and his brother Michael were found buried in an Indiana cornfield in 1986. The coroner's report indicated they had been beaten and buried alive, exactly as depicted in the film. Scorsese's decision to show the violence explicitly, rather than implying it off-screen, reinforced the film's theme about the inevitable brutality underlying the casino glamour. Fire in the Sky. The 1993 film, Fire in the Sky, depicts logger Travis Walton's claimed alien abduction experience. The abduction sequence begins with Walton waking on an alien ship covered in a translucent membrane. He tears free and explores the craft, eventually discovering a medical examination room. Aliens restrain him on a table. A large needle descends toward his eye. While he screams and struggles, the aliens insert probes into various parts of his body, studying him like a laboratory specimen. The claustrophobic environment, combined with the aliens' complete indifference to his terror, creates a sense of helplessness that resonates beyond typical horror. The scene lasts over 10 minutes and was filmed in tight close-ups to maximize the audience's discomfort. Director Robert Lieberman used practical effects and minimal CGI to keep the aliens feeling tangible and present. The real Travis Walton maintains that his experience was genuine, and this sequence represents his actual memories recovered through hypnotic regression. Whether the events occurred or represent psychological trauma, the film's depiction taps into primal fears about bodily violation and medical powerlessness. Critics noted that the scene's effectiveness came from treating the abduction not as a wonder-filled encounter, but as a traumatic assault. Terrifier Hacksaw Scene. Damien Leone's 2016 slasher film Terrifier pushed practical effects into new extremes of gore. The film's centerpiece Death features Art the Clown capturing two women, hanging one upside down naked from her ankles with her legs spread apart. Art produces a hacksaw. Starting at the groin, he begins sawing downward through the victim's body, splitting her vertically down the middle. The scene is filmed in one extended take with the camera never cutting away. Art makes steady progress through her pelvis, abdomen, and chest, while the victim screams and thrashes. The practical effects show every stage of the sawing in explicit detail. The scene lasts over 2 minutes of continuous screen time. What makes it particularly brutal is that the victim remains conscious far longer than seems medically possible, screaming until Art reaches her heart and lungs. Leone defended the sequence as homage to extreme horror films of the 1970s and 80s, particularly the Italian giallo tradition. The film was rejected by multiple distributors before finding success through independent distribution and streaming platforms. Horror fans debated whether the scene represented a return to uncompromising practical effects or simply crossed lines of good taste. The film spawned a sequel and turned Art the Clown into a modern horror icon, proving that audiences still responded to extreme practical violence. If you found this exploration of cinema's most brutal moments worthwhile, consider subscribing to catch future deep dives into film history. Thanks for watching.